Welcome back to the Murphree Network. The Visitation series will continue, but this story is part of a new series called The Thinner Veil Stories of the Spirit, where regular folks can share their paranormal experiences. These stories are true and presented with respect and gratitude for those who are willing to share. I have to tell you that as I have shared the first stories on this channel, I've seen folks' eyes light up, and many want to tell their own stories. And that's a very cool thing, because I believe that by sharing our stories, we strengthen one another and we encourage others to acknowledge their own experiences. So let's get started with the Thinner Veil Stories of Spirit. This first story comes from L. L is a big guy, a retired firefighter, emergency medical responder, and a very tough but compassionate man. In his life as a first responder, he has seen so many tragedies, most of us can only imagine. He's also saved lives. Elle is one of my heroes. So when he told me this story, I listened. And I listened with great respect, because this is a person who deals with science and facts and is cool and calm in the face of the worst cases of crisis. This is Elle's story, and these are his words. I was working emergency response, evening shift, when at about 10:30 p.m. we were all called out to a train vehicle accident. These types of accidents are almost always scenes of destruction and death. But we always hurry the response because if, miraculously, someone had survived, they would need help immediately. So we raced to the scene. When we arrived, we found multiple vehicles and witnesses at the train crossing, but only one car had been struck by the train. We shut down access to the area, and deputies began interviewing those who were present and saw the accident. Meantime, we looked for the victims. There wasn't much left of the car, so we didn't have much hope of finding someone alive, and we didn't. The deputies told us later that one train had been parked on the side track above the crossing to wait for another mail train to run through going the other direction. Once the mail train passed, the waiting train fired up to run its course. The car had waited for the mail train but did not see the waiting train coming and had pulled around and begun crossing the track. Witnesses said the car paused on the track as if there was hesitation on seeing the train headed for them, and then it struck. We found their bodies in different places, and we knew from the witnesses that one of the bodies was not accounted for, so I started looking. And I found her. In a low ditch area near the track. I walked back a ways to tell my partner and the other responders where she was. They would need to bring equipment to recover her. As I turned back toward her, I stopped. There was something hovering above the spot where she lay. I didn't move, but I leaned in to see if I could figure out what it was. I can only describe it as a grayish, whitish shape, somewhat transparent, but it was not a mist. It was much different than that. There was no moisture in the air that night, no lights, no moon, pitch black down that track. But this shapeless form had its own light, its own low but very present illumination. Not bright, but certainly not dark against the night. I could clearly see it. I know I stood transfixed for a few minutes, and then it went. It was just there, and then it wasn't. Now I know there are people who will want to explain this away, but I have spent over 30 years responding to accidents, crime scenes, and disasters of all kinds. And I have seen almost every imaginable scenario, especially for this area. But in all my life and all my long career, I had never, and have never since, seen what I saw that night. There was something there, something different than anything I'd ever seen before, hovering above that girl. Just so you know, I wasn't sure in that moment either. So I asked my partner, "Hey man, tell me, what did you see out here tonight?" My partner just looked at me. This is a guy that I had known for many years of responding to the worst scenes. I relied on his judgment and always respected his perspective. He said, "You want me to tell you?" And then he described this grayish, whitish, formless shape that was hovering over the dead girl, and that it hovered for a few minutes and finally disappeared. Not a mist, not a reflection. It had its own light. And it was just there, and then it wasn't. We finished our work on the scene, gathering up all the remnants of that tragedy. There was no one to save that night. And yet, something was different, especially for me. Many years later, I ran into a medic that had been there. After visiting for a moment, I asked her, "You were out there that night. What did you see?" Of course, no one forgets a tragic scene like that, so I knew she would remember that night. She said, "You really want me to tell you?" I nodded. And she said, "There was a grayish form that hovered over that girl, and I could see it clearly down that dark track. It stayed for a few minutes, and then it was gone." From what I remember, the shape was about 30 inches long by about 10 inches high, and it was about 5 feet above the girl. I don't know where the shape went, but I've thought about this since it happened, and I believe that we witnessed her spirit. Of course, I have no way of knowing, but that's what stays with me, that she waited for a moment and then left. I do not know where she went. I do not have any answers except, after that night, I was much stronger in my own belief that we continue, in whatever form. Our spirits continue, and for someone who has seen so many sad occasions, I find comfort in that knowledge. I want to thank El for sharing his story with us, and for all the life-saving efforts he and other first responders have given all of us over the years. Thank you is not enough, but I am grateful. That wraps up this story on the Murphree Network. Stay tuned for more stories in the days to come. And if you would like to share your real-life experience, or you have a story from a friend or someone in your family, please email the murphreenetwork@gmail.com. If you do not want to write out your story, you can just leave your number and I'll call you and get the details. That's the Murphree Network, all 3 words together, @gmail.com. Please like and subscribe to this channel. And until next time, be good to yourselves and take care of each other. You are not alone.